Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And I'm Mike.
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Scot Harvath Podcast. What's going on today, Mike?
And now we've come to the end of the road.
We are done. No, we're not done. We're never done.
We're never
But,
done.
there's
The
always
podcast lives.
there's always another book to be read, another character plot to be discussed. But
Another rant for me to go on.
this will be our last book, not our last pod, our last book covered on this podcast. We still have, well, I shouldn't even say that. This will be the last new book covered on this podcast. We have a couple more episodes we want to put out for you. Obviously, we got to do our final rankings and superlatives and all that. Maybe we do a revisited of some of the books we didn't have a scorecard yet, because this podcast goes all the way back to before we had a scorecard. Isn't that
Right.
insane?
We got to do Lions. Lions needs a score.
Yeah, for sure.
And Path. I think those are the two, Lions and Path.
Path needs this. I don't know if Path needs a score. But
Maybe does. I don't know. I think on reread it's going to be a little better. A little bit.
Let's see.
In light
Let's
of
see.
knowing some of the characters better and where they go.
Right.
So we'll see.
Right.
A couple of weird things still, though, in that one.
Okay.
Book 2.
But today, we're covering Black Ice.
Yeah.
Brad Thor's follow-up to Near Dark in this like cold, chilly trilogy of we're hanging out in the cold. I guess first we're in Russia with Backlash. Then we're in Near Dark. That's not cold, but like that's in Normandy and like France. But I don't. But they were also in like, I don't know. I just get the sense of like all three of these books, like just like they're cold to me.
I think Spy Master to this one, I just, for some, like Northern Europe, this one particular, Scandinavia, they all just feel like a set of books. And maybe it's that they're all kind of contemporary. Like I felt like this was modern Brad. This was the window, these four books, where I felt was my most recent Brad Thor kind of adventure. Very different than like the earlier books I read pre-pod, you know, the ones 5, 6, 7 years before we started this podcast. They just feel like a different age of Brad Thor. And these Northern European cold ones just feels like a set. And I think that's complete here, because what's Rising Tiger next? We go to India. That's a total turn of the page for Brad.
Yes, but also no. I think he, at least in this one, he's setting up what's going to be his major geopolitical points that he's going to bring up again in Rising Tiger.
That's true.
Again
That's true.
in Deadfall.
Shadow of Doubt.
Not so much Shadow of Doubt, but like, you know, this whole like the China is the enemy, the Belt and Road Initiative, like
They
this,
link
you know,
together for sure.
Yeah, like that is his new overarching, you know, like just how it is the overarching geopolitical problem. One could argue right now, that's what he's going for. But yeah, I will agree. Like this is kind of like a closing chapter, and really, like we're gonna go to some interesting like one-offs, like going to Rising Tiger, then Deadfall, Shadow of Doubt, yeah, and then Solvi is you know a key player going forward. So
yeah, I just think of, you're right. This one maybe I should give it more credit, because today I was going to talk about how it's not my favorite of the Brad Thor books, but you're right that geopolitical through line is one of the best, one of the most like creative, but also, you know, he's got his finger on something that is really important, unexpected, hasn't really been thought about that much. And it is going to carry through. So you're right. I think of this as like the Solvi introduction era, which clearly the last book was, wrapping up what we started with in Spy Master and Backlash. But I definitely agree with you. It's also kicking off what's to come, even though not directly, because we just kind of cut to India, we cut to Ukraine. It feels like the last few have not been connected. But you're right, this one does give you a little bit of a through line. And I think just, we've always said Brad Thor is the geopolitical master. Going to the Arctic was brilliant. How many times have we been hearing about in the last few months, an underwater sub goes into somebody's territory or cuts a fiber optic cable, or, you know, the straits around the world, right? Scott even mentions how the Suez and the Ever Given, that ship locked it off. The world went into chaos. International shipping and monetary policy was haywire from that one little event. And the Arctic could be the future there. And then another one I've been reading about the ice crackers, how we are completely behind the game on icebreakers.
Yeah, he
and
brings
having
that
these
up.
ships. He brings it up, goes into a deep dive. I actually found that paper, that Blue Arctic paper that he mentions, or I think it was Holiday Hayes, is filling Scott in about all the policy and how the Chinese are really trying to invest in ports. We see them doing that everywhere with Belt and Road,
Sure.
but they're also going north. Like we've read about that in Africa and India, but now they're doing that in the north too. And we got to be on our game. And combine that with the Russians, the Arctic is the biggest reason for the Chinese and the Russians to get into bed together, because the Chinese say they're a near Arctic state, which I like that little Brad Thorism of talking about, that little jab he has to give Russia and China. What does that even mean? It's
right.
It's made up, but it's the truth, right? China wants to stretch their muscle, and to do that in the Arctic, they got to partner with somebody, and Russia's their best bet.
Yeah, and I guess, not that I'm advocating for the taking over of Greenland, but you understand understand like why, I guess, this has been such a obsession of our current president. It's plots like these that are important going forward, these shipping lanes that either don't exist or right now or could exist. And it just shocked me, the fact that we have like two of these icebreakers. Neither of them are nuclear. One of them is decommissioned, like at the time of writing this book, when meanwhile they're about to put out these nuclear powered icebreakers. Like it's insane to me.
And how many Russia has. Like Russia is leading the game in all this.
Right.
And another thing I read about it is that you mentioned Trump, and we're not going to get into too much of it, but you could see, as ridiculous as something like taking over Canada or Greenland is, if you take it at face value, you're like, Jesus Christ, this is wild. But the core messaging behind it is we have to flex our muscle as well. We have to have some sort of presence in these areas, because look what we do in the East China Sea, right? Or South China Sea, basically that whole region. Our military is the reason there's free trade, and the reason so many countries, like Southeast Asian countries, small ones, can develop and have an economy and have trade, because China doesn't just dominate the maritime waters and basically make everyone pay who wants to use the waters. Like the U.S. military is keeping this stuff open. And if we don't do that in the Arctic,
right,
we, all our allies, all our trading partners, completely lose any bargaining power we have. But he said randomly in January, President Trump, something about we're going to buy 40 new ice crackers and we're going to get the best technology. We're going to do a deal with, I think Finland has really good technology in these. And people like laughed it off. And it was like the laughing stock of all like the news channels for a little while. Like, this guy's lost his mind. He has no competence. That's just because you don't understand. Like, you don't understand what the 2030s are going to look like. The 2040s are going to look like. And if we don't have icebreakers to compete with your Canada, your Russia, and now China getting involved in the game, we're screwed, because those are going to be the international shipping lanes of the next 30, 50 years. And so a gaffe like that, people saw it as a gaffe, and this article was saying how it was a Forbes article saying, well, actually, if you're into business and you want to get ahead of the curve and you're smart with money, you should take that comment. Take that comment seriously.
Companies.
Exactly. Take that comment seriously. Don't go on all the news networks and belittle it and joke about it. So that's our politics for the night. Sum it up by saying Brad Thor's got it right. He absolutely has his finger on the pulse.
Yeah, that's what he does best. I think we can argue a little bit about the plot of this book and how meaty it is, how intriguing it is. At times, this book, to me, I guess the reason why I liked the book, I liked it for a different reason than what I think I'm going to say. I learned a lot in this book, and it intrigued me a lot and forced me to, like, I'm looking up all the geography. Like, because again, last book, traveling heavy, this book, traveling light. Like, we're
traveling
only
medium.
We're only in Norway.
It's true. But we go to Svalbard.
Yeah, no, but it's cool how we're going to like all of
yeah.
these cool places, and it's forcing me to like look up like what is Kirkenes.
Yeah.
And I had no idea it was at the very top, like right next to Russia. And then I had no idea. I had never even heard of this
Svalbard.
Yeah, like what the hell that was.
I only heard of it because of the seed vault, which comes up, which is pretty cool.
And then I go down this whole rabbit hole reading about the seed vault, me being a biologist.
Documentaries on that. That thing is insane.
Like in this area that is in the middle of the Arctic Ocean, like the closest landmass to the North Pole. Just insane. These polar bears, everyone has to carry around a freaking rifle.
Right. Yeah. The polar bear stuff was cool.
It's just amazing to me. I don't know. To me, I would love to go to Antarctica, like those.
I would too.
Super remote places, like places where, you can count like less than 1,000 people have stepped.
Yeah.
I don't know. That really intrigues me.
No, I agree, dude. There's actually a scholarship fund that teachers can apply for through National Geographic to do an Antarctic cruise, the Grosvenor Fellowship. And I applied once when I was younger, and I still think it'd be so cool to do. And then similarly about these like new frontiers, I was listening to the Sean Ryan podcast, and he had on an astronaut, fighter pilot, Navy test pilot kind of guy, and he went up on a mission. I forget what it was called with SpaceX, but this mission, they were the farthest people have been in outer space since the Apollo missions. And it just happened a few months ago. And I'm like, a commercial group is now bringing astronauts to space further than anyone else has done in decades. And yeah, it's just exploring these new frontiers while reading this book and listening to a thing about space. And yeah, it just really opens your mind and your horizon. So I think the best part of this book is the geopolitical set piece. I think it's a pretty cool concept about the Russians trying to get this technology from the Chinese to shut down the U.S. and Norway's defense capabilities or detection capabilities so they can get subs between where they're trying to go over Europe, and how they need to be in bed with the Chinese. Like, all that concept is great. But if we're going to get into the nitty gritty on the plot, the characters, not doing it too much for me, particularly the villains. And then we got this B plot. It's kind of like Vince Flynn light. I mean,
it was very weird. It was just
weird. And it never came together. It never intertwined with what Scott was doing.
I mean, it did at the very end, in the fact that I guess she was he was being run as an asset for the Chinese government. Ultimately the lady that Scott kills at the very end was pulling all the strings, but it just wasn't. It wasn't that intriguing to me. Like,
it wasn't that interesting. And like, they're trying to, the Stephen Baldwin character kind of reminded me in Mitch Rapp of what's the weasel's name? The political operative hitman. The fixer behind the scenes.
Oh, Stu Garrett?
Like, almost like a Stu Garrett. Not as good.
You know who he reminded me of? He reminded me of Wilson, the FBI guy.
Yeah, that too.
The person who like felt that he was aggrieved. And he needed. This is like, and I felt like he set this guy up. This guy hit bankruptcy. He's kind of smarmy wife. Either he cheats on her, or she cheats on him. Excuse me,
he gets seduced by that Chinese spy.
It's but
I didn't buy that though.
You didn't buy what?
I didn't buy what was her name? Chang, I think. She was seducing Baldwin and like meeting with him. And then she was working with this Daniel Wu character, the Singaporean dude.
Oh yeah, and he never comes back in.
He never comes back, and they're all taking orders from, I think it was Ching, the lady pulling strings from China. Yeah, but I didn't see why we needed all these different people and all these different things going on. Honestly, if you drop that whole plot line and we just do a backlash style stay with Scott in Svalbard and the Arctic, and like that's it, he just finds like this Chinese dude selling the equipment, he finds the two Russians, those Spetsnaz guys who are going to take it, I would have been fine with that. I didn't need a B or a C plot in this book. It made it worse, I think.
Yeah, and the other thing, the whole reason that Scott gets involved in it is because he sees this ghost.
Yeah.
He thinks he saw someone that he killed.
All Asians look the same. I mean, is that what he's saying?
I was like, what? Seriously?
Yeah. And then I guess maybe the actual C plot, I would even call it the D plot, which again, when it kicked off, I was a little interested in, but I completely lost it. Interest was Astrid Jensen. She was
the fact that like Scott gets pulled in,
right, from beating up the two thugs who were mugging the old lady.
Yeah. And then,
now, what I liked two things about it.
The end.
I
cool.
like the end, right? I thought that was moving. That Sully sets this thing up at the palace, and he gets his reward. I thought he was going to get Norwegian citizenship.
Same. That's cool. What I thought it was coming with. Yeah.
Honorary citizenship or something, like the full legal capabilities to come to Norway whenever, travel throughout Norway whenever. So it was kind of nice at the end. It was almost like Star Wars,
right?
And
everyone gets
Return of the Jedi, right? Yeah. But the other thing I liked is when it's first introduced, when Scott has to deal with like, are we really dealing with this bullshit right now? A politician who wants to just make headlines for American beats up, asylum seekers and migrants. And again, Brad has his finger on the pulse. Sleazy politicians who just want headlines, don't care about the safety of their country, the safety of the citizens, don't care about victims' rights, don't care about people victimized by these bullies, but only cares about scoring cheap political points by saying, look, they're mean to migrants, they're racist, And how Holiday Hayes made that disappear. It's cool, but I don't know if it was written or incorporated well into the plot.
Yeah, this idea of Scott, however it comes to be, but, him being on the chase, to find this guy, and this guy leads him to essentially discovering that there's this, nefarious plot happening, and now, oh shit, I got to go there. Like that in itself, great idea.
Sure. That's a great way to bring Scott back.
Like putting him, really, you want to obviously explore Norway. We're going to go from the tip to top, like, all around, and really immerse yourself in the geopoliticals of this thing. It's all great. But yeah, some of the window dressings, like everything around it, just didn't do it for me.
I feel like I almost wish we could trade some of the Chinese villain Stephen Baldwin being seduced stuff and trade that in for more time with Gary Lawler and Nicholas and something that they're doing.
Yeah, Gary Lawler was put on the shelf like very early on in the book.
Have him liaise with Holiday Hayes. I think watching him, Nicholas and Holiday Hayes have a little more screen time to see how they're handling the domestic stuff, if you will, with Astrid Jensen and basically playing spy. Because Holiday Hayes, I think, could be really good spy and really good diplomat, kind of rolled into one. Use her and have her present instead of just making her this fixer in the background who makes everything go away. And then she shows up at a very happy moment at the end.
So another character that we need to talk about is Mercer.
Oh, Mercer was great.
What did you think about getting the Peaches story? I wanted to, as soon as I listened to it, I wanted to get your opinion of it.
That was something that I really wanted. I remember when the book first came out, I was thinking about that quite a bit. I'm a little torn because I really like the character. But again, it's how he's incorporated. I think to out of the blue have somebody that close to Reed Carlton. What was it? I think 5-6 chapters back to back to back of him just recounting this event with Reed in Berlin. Really, really super cool. And where peaches come from, man.
Yeah.
A can of peaches and he's smacking the guy's balls, Oh, and they even shoot. Doesn't he use a crossbow to string the wire, or a bow and arrow string the wire across the Berlin wall?
So they can zip line across the Berlin Wall.
Yeah. Zip line across the Berlin Wall to get out. Like, make that its own book, and you just wrote the coolest thing ever. But we forced it into a few chapters with a guy we don't even know, yet we're just asked to trust and we're asked to believe right off the bat. Never heard of this guy, don't know anything, and all of a sudden Scott's sitting at his feet just listening to these stories like, oh my God, you knew Reed Carlton that well. I don't know if I bought that. It's so cool. I wish it had more time to breathe.
You 100% stole what I was thinking. It's so cool. It's like, all right, Brad wanted to tell the story and did. but Mercer was just not the right guy to tell it.
No.
And obviously, he would have known Gary Lawler too, because he mentions like Lydica Pub. And
yes.
So how did Scott, like, I guess Brad explains it away that they had a falling out, and I don't know.
Falling out was weird.
Yeah, and then it's just like back to back to back to back, like, you know.
And this guy, he met a Norwegian and now lives there. And just
he just happens to be at the northernmost post in Norway, and
happens to be at this town they have to go to. He seemed like a guy who has no reason to be there except for to make Scott think like, I wonder if I can get out of the game and settle down with Sully, and if this life would make me happy. Like, you're just there to kind of pose that question to Scott, which clearly the answer for him is no. He's got to keep operating. That's why he hasn't moved over and just lived with Sully anymore and just left. So
and we know that hasn't happened like a couple more books down the road. So
yeah, Mercer was just a weird character to plug in at that moment and go so heavy-handed
and go very heavy-handed on it.
If it was a light touch of this guy, I did some work with Reed. Oh, you knew him too? Okay, now let's operate together. Great.
Yeah. And when
it wasn't just that.
When he initially, like, you know, establishes his bona fides, like, oh, I know Reed, like, that's cool. It's great. It's a quick establishment of this character, and Scott has, you know, at least a modicum of trust for him because of this. Then pretty much to make him be the Scott before Scott.
Exactly.
Essentially. Yeah. Like, you know,
yeah,
the guy who was going to be lined up to be Reed's protege. And then the guy, you know, like, but he now had to get shelved because, like,
and nobody's ever heard of him before.
Right.
And Nicholas never came across this file. And I know Reed Carlton compartmentalized things, but no one's ever heard of him. Not even a hint that this guy was somebody.
Like, there has to be another person at the Carlton Group who's older than Scott, who's been there longer than Scott, you know?
Yeah. Well, I guess there isn't, because that's why they bring in what's her name, who is going to be the next director after Reed, who gets killed. And then why they bring back like Gary Lawler, because there isn't, it would have been a Mercer, but he's gone. He quit.
Okay, so how small is this Carlton Group?
Honestly, I think pretty small in terms of who pulls the strings and runs the front office, but kind of big in terms of contacts and contractors and assets.
Because they have that building in Tice's Corners, and there's there's times where there's obviously more people than we know, because remember when early on, like, there were people that were making fun of the troll and Scott had to step in.
That's true. There are employees, yeah.
So it's not just, it's like, 'cause I feel like Chase, Palmer, Stalin, like, none of those guys would have been the people that were making fun of.
No.
Nicholas. So it's like these other random guys that we'd never met, right?
Wrong time, wrong place for a character like Mercer.
It was just so heavy-handed. It was just so heavy-handed.
And it was even laid on thicker when Scott meets with the wife and she takes him to the ice hotel. And like, that's Brad being Brad, right? He's heard about this thing. He's probably been there. He knows about it.
Right. Yeah.
Like, he's probably done this whole thing and like, really, I wanted to put this in the book. So let me have Scott meet up with Mercer's wife, and they get there early, and it was also just forced, that whole thing, just to get the two together.
Ice hotel
in the ice hotel,
bar.
Ice bar. Yeah. A lot of heavy-handed forcing. Kind of rubs me the wrong way.
I did like Mercer in terms of like his actual capabilities. Like, he was a really cool character in terms of, you know, this idea of this older CIA guy who still wants to be in the game, good fixer. You know, obviously he comes in like the very end. He's like, wait, do you want these bodies to be, I love the question he asks. He's like, wait, do you want these like gone, like never existed, or just, you know, so that way we can get out of the country?
Yeah,
all right,
and they're talking about this,
and this. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. He's done it before. He's seen a thing or two. Oh, and he has the bag. He hid in kind of like that basement, subfloor level, whatever that was. He hid he put the GPS receiver, the gun, and it was like his cash for like his insurance policy for the future if he ever goes back. Yeah, Like Easter eggs like that are just a lot of fun. I just don't know if he was the right guy for it.
All right, you set him up as a character in this book.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Then you come back to him next book, 2 books down the road, and that's when you get the Peaches story.
I agree.
Because like you want to establish his bona fides with the reader throughout this entire book.
Yep.
Showcase him as this cool character that obviously had a relationship with Reed. It's got to be hard to and this guy's an open book. He just like, oh, I'm going to spill all my stuff to you
Spills
like immediately. Like get the
him
fuck
and Scott
out
are
of
like
here.
best friends. Him, Scott, and the wife are like all of a sudden the closest buddies in the world, all because, oh, you knew Reed, I knew him too. Let's get together and talk about it.
He doesn't do that with George Ashby or whatever his name was, the British guy.
Oh, the MI. Oh, and when his name is dropped,
Yeah.
dude.
Oh, we found out
Ashby-
that he died. He died in Alaska.
Yeah. Robert Ashford.
Robert Ashford.
That's
Yeah.
it. Sloan Ashby, Robert Ashford. When, okay, that does bring Mercer into the fold a little when he says, like, you know, when we were operating over there, this British guy who was working with us, a little squirrely, stayed to himself. What was his name? Robert Ashford. I was like, yo, that deep cut worked for me.
No, I think like, and the actual story, his story in Berlin worked.
Yeah, the Berlin story was awesome.
You could have easily written an entire prequel.
That you write that as a book. Write that as the Gary Lawler book
or a novella. Like that's a cool Gary Lawler novella. You know?
Yeah,
because obviously
he's
but Gary's there too.
Yeah.
So
I love that stuff. Yeah, I just don't know if I wanted it here when we're in northern Norway trying to stop the Chinese and Russians from taking down our detection capabilities.
And it just took us, because it was 5 or 6 chapters, it just took us out of our like frame of mind. It's like, oh, because literally during that time he's sitting at this diner having pancakes, like when he's supposed to be, you know, trying to find this
technology, this equipment. Now, here's another thing. It kind of worked, but I don't know if it was the usual Brad Thor style. It was trying something new. Opening with the helicopter crash. I kind of forgot that was the little prologue in Svalbard. And I went back and listened to the start of the book. They give you the coordinates. They say off the coast of Svalbard. And the helicopter crashes, and we don't know why.
And then
we don't know who he's with. And then it says 72 hours earlier, and he's beating up the dudes on the streets of Oslo. That was an interesting technique. I forgot he did that. And then when the helicopter crash came, I was like,
I've read this before.
Eerily similar. Yeah.
I had the same exact thing. I completely forgot.
It was chapter 1.
That's how we open. And then halfway through, I'm like, oh wait, I know why I'm remembering this is because was the prologue.
Now, a little credit here. Something Brad Thor does excellently, it was superbly well done. Every book. The guys Scott relies on along the way, and/or has to help. The 2 dudes who fly him and take him to Svalbard.
They're cool and funny.
Yeah, they're awesome. Scott has to save him eventually, but they're hooking him up. He's a teacher, right? He's giving him this cover story. He's doing research on coal mining or whatever. And then when this plane crashed, I just imagine them being like, and I'm surprised he didn't write this joke, but being like, teacher? What kind of teacher swims holding, an unconscious body across the Arctic and saves us and does all this medical life-saving stuff?
Seal blubber,
Yeah, and then starts the fire to warm them up. Yeah, MacGyver's the shit out of this. I mean, I want to be that teacher. But cool stuff, good characters, and gripping part of the book. It was good.
No, I think all the stuff on, up there,
Kirkenes,
yeah. When he goes to find the first Russian, interrogates him, finds, I got to go over to this location, having the helicopter crash.
It's well done.
Seeing the polar bear, like all that stuff was really cool. And then ultimately, sneaking into this research facility, that key was very interesting. And why the hell did Holiday Hayes happen to have this key? And she just shows up at the airport and like, hey, here's your key. Like, We just happen to have it.
Also a little forced. And she even said they don't know what it's to, but just maybe
You
it's
might
to
need
this
it.
facility.
You might need it.
Okay, life at the facility was kind of fun because we
Yeah.
were talking about like exploring Antarctica or something. McMurdo Station. Like I would imagine living at one of these places is just like it was described. There's mealtime. Everyone knows what everyone else is doing. Everyone's on the same schedule because either the sun's up the entire time or the sun's down the entire time. When you're going to sleep, when you're going to wake up, and I kind of like that. It felt like military, but military light. Right. And that's what I imagine one of these scientific bases is like. You know, it's almost like you're in the military, but you also have a lot of freedom.
Yeah, very true. What else? What else do I want to bring up? Oh, did you find it weird that he like had an affection to the guy he thought was a ghost at the very end?
The Chinese guy.
Yeah.
Which was like a cousin, right, of the actual guy
he was
a
cousin of the actual guy he killed at the end.
Who looks just like him.
What book was that? Act of War?
It was one of those. It was the guy running. Was he the one running that op where they were like in Inner Mongolia?
Yes.
Training a bunch of people to be Americans, to be these deep cover plots.
Yes.
Yeah, he's very sympathetic to the cousin guy.
Yeah, he goes from thinking, tracking this guy down to, being very sympathetic towards him. I just thought it was interesting. Not that I guess this guy did end up helping. He did end up helping the United States, but in the beginning he was an adversary. So
there were some good interrogation scenes, I think, that led us to that point. Mm-hmm. Like he's got the one guy, isn't he hanging by his wrists?
Yeah,
forever, and then he's playing the two against each other. He's like, the other guy, the Russian, gave me all the info. So what deal are you going to cut? And then this Chinese guy is like, I'm ready to speak. I think when Scott realizes he broke somebody, and that guy comes honest, comes out and honestly gives him info that helps him save the day. I think Scott's sense of justice is that person kind of atoned for their sins. Mm. And he's got the cancer too. And he sets him up with, treatment in the U.S. at a cancer facility. Yeah, I think because we went through the interrogation stuff to get there, and this guy was tortured, and this guy basically said, like, I'll relent. I'll give in. I think I buy that Scott hooked him up. Scott's a man of his word in that sense.
Yeah, true. What do you think of Solvay in this book?
I really like Solvay in the beginning.
Less used than last book, for sure.
Right. I liked in the beginning that the two almost had
like a normal life.
They had a normal life, but at the same time, they knew each other professionally. Mm. Like when the cops knock on the door and it's one of Solvay's, not a colleague, but someone she's worked with in the past, but they're there to interrogate Scott. She's both playing this role of like wife and partner who wants to protect the husband, but also playing the role of, I'm going to pull my strings and call Holiday Hayes and get the embassy and get the lawyer hooked up. So she's playing cop and wife at the same time, which is a lot of fun. And I like how she helped out with the cab footage when Scott beat up those guys, or the Chinese guy, when he saw the Chinese guy in the cab and needed the footage. And when he beat up the guys, she helped, get Holiday Hayes on the case to clear him up there. I like that she was doing that stuff because that's her job. And then she disappears.
Right.
She's gone.
As soon as we go up north, she can't go with him. So,
but that essentially keeps up with Rising Tiger and Deadfall.
Yeah, exactly.
She can't be there because she's got a job and she's committed to that job, and she's back in Norway working.
And I guess that's where Shadow of Doubt.
It comes together.
Comes to a head. Yeah.
Because she has to be pulled in because that Russian defector dude goes to Norway. Yeah. That's why I wonder with Edge of Honor, we saw with Laura, we did the same thing. She came on strong. She was a cop.
Right.
Really good role to play.
Yeah.
And then 5 or 6 books, you didn't know what to do with her. Solvay comes on strong, has 2, 3 books now, is killing it. She's involved. She's almost as good as Scott. She can operate.
Yeah, but they get married at the end of Shadow of Doubt.
And they're married now. So what does this look like? What does long distance relationship look like? What do 2 different career paths look like? how do you make her just a Lara who disappears into the background, then eventually gets off? You can't do that.
You can't do that again.
She needs a different path.
You cannot do that again.
No. She needs a different path. Is that path just, well, isn't Scott going to go to Norway? What happened?
I really need to read Shadow of Doubt again, like, honestly.
Or was it, I think Shadow of Doubt, they both agreed they were going to make sacrifices to be together. I forget who. Was she going to come live here? I forget who was going to live where, but I think they're committed to more time together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot exactly what happened in that book. But yeah, they're married, so we got to do something different in the next one.
Yeah.
I hope they operate together again.
Yeah, because they were so great last book.
Exactly. Last book, it was so much fun watching them last book. I want that feeling back in Edge of Honor.
You ready for a scorecard?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get into it.
I'm super intrigued to see if this one will be higher or lower than Near Dark.
Yeah. I have a sense. I'll put it this way. I would have rated it higher than Near Dark before our reread. Like before this podcast. I remember it being really cool, the Russian-Chinese submarines in the Arctic and blah, blah, blah. But rereading Near Dark, I felt like it did some things that I really liked and had forgotten about.
Right.
So I'm expecting now it to slip below Near Dark. Just that's what I'm expecting. But we'll see what happens.
Okay.
Give me your action.
Action.
Considering that there isn't any in this book, what do you say?
No, that's not true. It's action suspense. Remember, we rebranded this. Because you could say that a lot of the stuff that's on once we get to what is the Solvland? Svalbard, yeah.
Yeah.
Like all that is,
it's suspenseful,
thriller suspense.
Sure.
When we're doing some of the SDRs and he gets, at one point he gets choked out by those like thugs. We didn't even talk about that. Remember, he gets caught when he's following the first, Asian guy, and there's that other. Cause we have a whole another Russian that he takes, right? Remember that?
Well, yeah, the guy he's also interrogating with the
right.
Chinese guy.
Yeah,
I forget his name. Yeah, getting him. It's so beige. It's just forgotten. It had no flavor, color. I don't even remember who these guys were. It got lost.
They were
just
Well, because we had 6 chapters of Peaches
in between. Was it. I was so distracted by the Mercer stuff. Like that's playing over in my mind.
Right. Because that's so revolutionary, like revelatory.
Yeah. Just get Scott to Kirkenes after that. There's nothing else in between that matters to me.
Yeah.
All right.
6.
I was going to say 6. Yeah, I thought 6 might be harsh, but I was going to settle there. Plot. I think we have to give credit to the geopolitical stuff, the setup. Yeah. I think I got to give credit to that.
And I have to give credit to the ingenuity, like the idea of like the basic of the plot.
Yeah.
I'm going to give it a 7.
I think a 7. Yeah. The buy-in.
I mean,
it goes up and down.
It's a very real novel.
Sure.
Because there's not a lot of like fantastical Scott fighting 5 packs of wolves.
Yeah.
While, he does like survive a helicopter crash, swim in the Arctic Ocean, carrying a dude, and
that sequence gives half a point to action, but it takes a full point away from buy-in.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like a 3.5.
I'm
4.
bought into how the Chinese are operating to try to get this Alaskan pipeline, and they're like trying to convince the senators and throw money behind a campaign, seduce a political operative in a hotel. I believe that's how the game is played. So I buy into it happening. I just don't buy into how it's incorporated into this story, if that makes sense. So I think altogether, I'm between a 3 and a 3.5 on buy-in.
Yeah, I was going to do 3.5.
Yeah.
I think the individual parts I can buy into, but when they're coming together, like it's just not the way they were utilized.
Yeah.
It's tough, and it's I don't know. Man, bad guys are going to suffer here because
Did you care about Ching or
No.
Chang, either of the Chinese, or he? I think was one of the guys. Did you care about this Daniel Woe who disappears? That Singaporean guy we open with? Absolutely not.
No.
Worst villains in the series, possibly.
Yeah, because in the end, the one guy we get the most FaceTime with, Scott, becomes like semi-friendly with, and at the very end, it gives him a house, gives him a new lease on life at the Mayo Clinic, just to I'll get him to say like, hey, how can I kill your boss? And then that action was not the best assassination I've seen Scott do.
No,
he just like shows up and boom.
I don't like when there's those let's get the big bad in the last few chapters just to wrap it up.
Sure.
And do something that is I don't really care about. I literally breeze through those chapters. Once the set action piece happens, the Svalbard when they're hunting, I think is really cool when they're like, there's that like chase scene. It's almost like a chase and follow scene where they're following the guys to see where they end up. Maybe it wasn't Svalbard. It could have been outside Kirkenes. I think it's when they get the first device.
It's outside Kirkenes.
Yeah, it's when they get the first device. I thought that was a really cool little scene. And then how they're going to track these guys down. The two Russians who go to pick up the thing in that cabin. I had fun with that. But I don't care about when you go hunt the big bad at the very end just to put a bow on things. Like those little set action pieces for me are the climax and what I want to see happen to kind of like Memorial Day, right? You literally bring us to the peak of the action with the helicopter, with the bomb in the mountain, with getting the hell out of the mountain as the thing goes off and you just locked it down. Boom, end of book. I don't need those 4 or 5 chapters of denouement going to find somebody just because they authorized this or whatever.
Yeah, I agree.
The bad guys stink too.
I was going to go 1.
Ooh, I probably should. I'm trying to be generous.
Good guys.
All right, give me one. Give me one.
Holiday Hayes, great.
Great. Fantastic.
Solvey, great. Lawler,
underutilized.
Underutilized.
Also underutilized.
Mercer. I will say, Mercer is a good character.
Yeah. We did the Mercer talk, yeah.
We talk, and that's like a dinging on the plot and the buy-in too. So exactly. I'm not going to ding him here for that. So, it's a solid 4 from good guys.
It's a 4.
It's not a 5.
Yeah. Chris, just give the scores and I'll agree with everything you say. So
settings a 5. Settings a 5.
Ooh,
I felt cold. I felt intrigued.
Sure.
I love this idea of just, we're going to explore all one country.
Yeah.
I thought he did great describing, maybe not so much describing a little bit of Oslo, but a lot of Kirkenes, a lot of Svalbard, this whole region. So.
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to give it to you. I'm going to give that 5 for Norway. The only thing that would have brought me down in the beginning was, I think we were in Singapore when we meet that guy, or we were in somewhere else, and the meeting in the hotel rooms with Baldwin and all that. All those were just very bland scenes.
Oh yeah,
I didn't know where they were taking place. And then they go to Alaska, right? Because the Alaskan senators or he's got to meet with the Alaskan senators. He's on a plane, I remember at one point. All of that, I had no ground in where they are and what it's like. But for Norway, yeah, I'll take the 5. For sure.
All right, who's your free space?
The Chinese and the Russians and how they're described, this blue Arctic paper from the very beginning. I think it was Holiday Hayes who was really explaining to them how they're playing the game, right? Like, she's working with the station chief and the ambassador. She's the boots on the ground doing the political stuff and the spy stuff and the espionage. And she's kind of saying how this game is being played and how the Chinese are winning and beating us and how they're in bed with the Russians and our policy is not good enough to stop them. Setting that whole thing up, rolling out the red carpet for this storyline. was masterful. I think going to the Arctic, talking about these real life situations, I think was perfectly done. It's Brad's bread and butter, and it deserves a free space winner of this book.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. What can I pick? Love this book. Yeah, I kind of said it earlier, but just
Slim Pickens.
Yeah, it's kind of bad when you're Slim Pickens, but yeah, I'll just say it again. What I loved about this book the most, and every little nugget that he puts in the story about location, about the geopolitics, had me intrigued. And had me wanting to, it's that perfect balance of faction and, forcing you to like, oh, I want to look that up.
Perfect faction.
That's what I'm going to remember most about this book. Not so much the rest of it, but that for sure.
This is probably because, man, we've missed an opportunity through some of these books to find Brad's 5 Fast Facts on his website. Great blog. This is one of the top books I want to go read, his Fast Facts. And I just searched it. Yes, he has it. Yep. Talks about the ice cutters, the snow hotel, obviously, he wanted to put in. The Chinese research facility up in somewhere in the Arctic. Coercive diplomacy, the global seed vault on Svalbard. Yeah. The faction is out of control in this book. It's amazing. I definitely this is one of the books where when he was researching it, I would have wanted to just, be the biographer following Brad Thor around, just taking notes on, what his life is like while he does this research. I would have loved to see that. So yeah, good pull. It all comes down to the cover. Judge a cover by the book. Are we going to end on a positive note here, Chris, or not? You tell me.
I don't know. You tell me. You go first.
I'm going to end on a very positive note. 4.5.
Ooh, 4.5.
You said that feeling of cold, dude. I would say cold and dark. You don't need the aurora borealis. It's like just enough hint of the night sky, the Arctic night sky. It's exactly the kind of landscape I was picturing, almost exactly what I saw in Iceland, kind of looks like. Either A or B. You can give me A or B.
I like B too.
They're both landscapes I would have thought of, and the symbol on B
I just looked this up.
Pretty cool.
Do you know what it is?
No, I was going to say just for mountains, like icy cap mountains.
It's the Volknut, a symbol consisting of 3 interlocking triangles. It appears on a variety of objects from archaeological records of the ancient Germanic people. So it has roots back, like wooden, often Viking ships would have this on there.
Give me 5. Give me 5. You said enough. So this is a classic example of how the symbol can work.
Yes, but there's also another cover you don't have here. I realized it was the cover that was on our Everand.
With the audiobook one. Okay. Let's call that cover D. I'll add it.
It has a guy. It's very similar to cover A.
Yep.
It has
cover
a guy.
A with the silhouette of Near Dark.
But I like the guy because
it's true.
It reminded me of, because it's like near the Arctic Sea. It's like he just fell off the helicopter and now he's either just got up on the thing or now he's like, he has his friends like tucked in this cave and now he's going to that was like one of the coolest scenes of the book. And I was like, all right, you nailed it with that.
You captured it. Yeah. And that's only on the audiobook cover.
I know.
Even though cover A could definitely incorporate that.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. But
do you also see how ice is a different color? Black ice. Ice is dark on the audiobook one.
I did notice that. Yeah.
Because it's in the water. The audiobook one's pretty cool.
I like these A, B, C. Cover C. It's too white.
It's the Dutch doing what the Dutch do, man.
Yeah, the Dutch and Scot Harvath thriller.
Ein Scot Harvath thriller. Ein Mitch Rapp thriller. International bestseller outer. Seller out there. Black ice. Zwart Oos. That's my best Flemish that I got for you. I don't know why. The last 6 or 7 books, the only alternative cover from the American version and the American paperback has been a Flemish version.
Really?
I don't
That's
know.
weird.
I don't know why. Up the Flanders, I mean, they love this stuff. There's not even like a Euro Australian version that I found.
Wow.
Yeah, maybe there is. Maybe they just went with the standard cover A, even in European and Australian markets, or outside of the Dutch for some reason. I don't know.
Okay. All right, so what do we got here? We got a lot of fives at the bottom here. So we have 5, 10, 15, 20, 30.5, 36.5.
36.5, and we matched up.
Yeah, almost exactly.
You know what? We've had a mind meld recently where I kind of know, even if it's different than my scores, I know what you're going to give or I know what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And then more recently, we've also been giving the same scores or within half a point.
Yeah.
I feel like over the course of the podcast, we both kind of really fell in line of like what we like, what we don't like, what our different interests and peculiarities are with some books. Like I read a book and part of what I'm thinking is like, oh, Chris is going to like this.
Yeah.
Chris is going to love that.
So I wanted to bring this up. Like, what if we had to submit our scorecards before we talk?
Ooh.
And
that's
then,
an experiment.
If there's some way that we had to send it to each other, but we can't look at it
until
we send it to like our email, like our
don't look at it.
You're not allowed to look at it. It has to be stay on, that kind of thing.
So it's timestamped. So it's not like I just changed it after we talked.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting because we also, there's a lot of times where either me comes in hot or not liking it, or you come in not liking it, and then we kind of like can sell it to each other. Like, or we can sell at least what we like about the book to each other and, bring other people on board.
Yeah.
So.
One of my favorite texts to get is kind of like either the day of or the day before we record, when you text me like, oh, I love this book. And I'm like, oh shit, I hated this book. Or I text you like, yo, this book stinks. It is fun. I like going into pods where we don't know each other's reactions, but sometimes when you kind of tease me about it, it gets me going.
Or when you're like, ooh, I got a hot take about this one. I'm like, oh man, what is he going to say? What is he going to say?
And then you never know if my hot take is going to be me totally trashing it, or if my hot take is I really like something.
Right.
Yeah. Build the anticipation.
It's right there, just below Near Dark.
Yeah, just below, I think, is where I would have pegged it. I remember reading it the first time, I liked it more because I was confused with Near Dark, and this one like hit so hard with the Arctic plot line being so perfect. But man, the Near Dark B and C plots and like Near Dark goings on in the background makes so much more sense. So much more sense than the B and C plots and the background stuff of this book.
Right. For sure. All right. Well, next time we're going to be either one of two things. It's going to be a movie pod. So we've watched this movie, The 12th Man, which eerily similar to the plot of Backlash. So me and Mike are going to give our thoughts on that. We're most likely going to give a recap on Revisited for the first two books in the series, since that was pre-Thriller Scorecard. And then finally, we got to wrap it up with some superlatives. Our final wrap up, the Scot Harvath Pod episode. Yeah. So if in the meantime, go check us out on both of our other pod feeds. Got plenty of content. Go read a book. We'll be coming at you with a lot of new releases coming up. We got our Fade In arc. Got to read that.
Yep.
We've
been a little dormant on Thriller Pod, but we're going to come back with Fade, and we've got some other things lined up. What was the other one we just released on Thriller Pod? I just edited an episode and got it dropped. The Seventh Floor. Yep.
Yeah.
David McCloskey. So we're going to keep things coming over there, but a little quiet over there while we wrap up the Scot Harvath stuff over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah. All right. Well, we need to thank our patrons, including our Deputy Director, Sherry F., our Special Operator, Jason C., our Special Agents, Ben, Daryl, Kevin, George, Matt, Don, Peggy, Mark, and Chris. Please subscribe, rate, and review all 3 seasons of No Limits. You can find us at thrillerpod.com or on Twitter and Instagram at Thriller Podcast. And as always, just let peaches be peaches.